That just seems wrong to me. If I can, I'll go quickly, Mr. Chairman Johnson. I have one more question I'd like to ask, and that's a question about why the large banks are trading at below book value. We all understand that book value, it's just what the assets are listed for, what the liabilities are, and that most big corporations trade well above book value. But many of the Wall Street banks right now are trading below book value, and I can only think of two reasons why that would be so. One would be because nobody believes that the bank's books are honest, or the second would be that nobody believes that the banks are really manageable. That is, that they are too complex either for their own institutions to manage them or for the regulators to manage them. And so the question I have is, what reassurance can you give that these large Wall Street banks that are trading for below book value, in fact, are adequately transparent and adequately managed? Governor Tarullo or Ms. Miller?
So there's certainly another reason we might add to your list, Senator Warren, which is investors' skepticism as to whether a firm is going to make a return on equity that is in excess of what the investor regards as the value of the individual parts. And so I think what you would hear analysts say is that in the wake of the crisis, there have been issues on just that point surrounding first what the regulatory environment is going to be, how much capital is going to be required, what activities are going to be restricted, what aren't going to be restricted. Two, for some time there have been questions about the franchise value of some of these institutions. The crisis showed that some of the so-called synergies were not very synergistic at all, and in fact there really wasn't the potential, at least on a sustainable basis, to make a lot of money. I think and part of it I think is probably just the environment of economic uncertainty. I think that in some cases where you've seen some effort to get rid of large amounts of assets at some of the large institutions, it is indirectly in response to just this point. Some of them, I think, have concluded that they are not in a position to have a viable, manageable, profitable franchise if they've got all of the entities that they had before. And so a couple of them, as I say, have actually reduced or are in the process of reducing their balance sheets. The other thing I would note is you're absolutely right about the difference there. The difference actually, as the economy has been improving and some of the firms have built up their capital, you've seen that difference actually narrowing in a number of cases as they seem to have a better position in the view of the market from which to proceed in a more feasible fashion.
Good. Well, I appreciate it, and I apologize for going over, Mr.
Senator Hagan.
Thank you.
I am very deeply troubled about some of the allegations that have been made about improper fraudulent servicing and foreclosure processing. And one example, a constituent of mine from Whitehall, seeking a modification from Bank of America, was told by a servicing associate that while the loan modification was in review, the homeowner should not make any mortgage payments. Let me repeat that. He was told by their servicer, Bank of America, not to make any payments, and that if they did, they wouldn't qualify for modification. The gentleman from Helena, how is it possible he would receive a letter indicating that he is in foreclosure before foreclosure processing is restarted in the state of Montana? There's no doubt in my mind this is not isolated. Montana is not a state where people come to a U.S. Senator just willy-nilly. At a minimum, we need to understand these risks before the Fed moves forward with guidance allowing banks to increase dividends, because, quite frankly, there ain't going to be any more bailouts. I mean, to be honest with you, some heads have to roll if they're given that kind of advice. That's just the way it is.
Senator Merkley.
Because we have millions of people in this country that are underwater in their mortgages, right? We know that. I, for one, don't believe that it's possible to prop up the value of all of these houses. That's impossible. And that it would be foolish public policy to do. Why can't we get all of this self-interest aligned in a way that will allow us to proceed expeditiously, so that not just so that my constituents can get on with their lives, which they desperately want to do, but so that we can get this economy moving again. Professor.
I think there are at least two problems. One problem is mortgage servicers, and I think you've heard a fair amount of testimony already at this hearing about the incentive alignment problem. Simply put, foreclosure is either less costly or more profitable than modification in many cases. The second problem...
Not as far as the investors are concerned.
No, this is the servicers representing their own financial interests, which are, the servicers' financial interests do not match the investors. The second problem is it comes with loans that are not being serviced by a third-party servicer, but with loans that are actually on bank books. There is a strong disincentive for banks to recognize losses on mortgages quickly.
What percentage would you say of...
Around 40% of mortgages in this country are not securitized. We don't actually know how many mortgages there are in the U.S., which is just kind of an astounding regulatory failure to gather information. No one knows the number, somewhere between 50 and 60 million. But of the mortgages that are on bank books, if the loan defaults, the bank can stretch out the period of time before foreclosure. That means that the bank is stretching out the time before it has to recognize the loss. If the bank modifies the loan now, let's say it writes down principal now, it's taking an immediate loss, and this is particularly a problem with second liens, because almost all second lien mortgages are on banks' books. There are around $400 billion in second lien mortgages out there. That is roughly equal. They're held by the four largest banks: Bank of America, Chase, Citi, and am I forgetting Wells? That's roughly equal to the market capitalization of those four banks. So if they started writing off their second lien mortgages, they would have no capital left. They would be insolvent. And that creates a strong incentive not to recognize losses and to do extended and just try and pretend that they aren't there.